once again to discuss things.
Stuff I want to read. Greg Robbins one run. I want to read that. And just like my list. I think it's over like $1,000. Oh my god! Like just DC stuff that's on my list. It's insane.
Oh man, alright, let's go ahead and get into this. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Partu. Joining me once again is Jacob Carlson.
Hey everybody.
Hey. So Jacob is obsessed with the Flash, and in exchange for the character drawings on these title cards we've been using lately, I am reviewing the Flash with Jacob and having quite a good time doing it, so it was really a win-win for me. So anyway, we're back with Geoff Johns' The Flash Book 3, so that's cool. I'll let you start us off. Where's a good place to start with this one, Jacob?
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me on again. It's been great talking to you about this stuff, too. I'm glad you're liking the material so far. I guess I was actually going to ask you where you wanted to start with this, because the last time we talked, it seemed like you didn't know where Hunter Zolomon was going. So
I did not, and then you told me don't look anything up, and I was like, oh, okay, I wonder what they're going to do with him. And then I bought this and saw, oh, Reverse Flash is on the cover. It's going to be Hunter Zolomon.
So how did you feel about that? How did you feel about that conflict throughout this book?
You know, it's interesting because initially when he becomes Reverse Flash, I was like, wow, this really doesn't feel like it has enough setup. Like it does like the Two-Face thing where it's got, you know, that they are friends and they have a couple differences, and then something tragic happens. But like there's I just don't buy that Hunter Zolomon is like immediately that pissed. But that being said, once he is the Reverse Flash, he is so damn mean.
Right. And importantly, he's not Reverse Flash. He's Zoom. He's not Professor Zoom. He's Zoom. I mean, he is like a Reverse Flash because you have the Flash legacy and then the Reverse Flash legacy. And I think Johns was just trying to simplify the naming thing because it is
a better name. Yeah. Because like anytime you say Reverse Flash, the thought goes, well, shouldn't he be really slow?
Right. So it's interesting that you thought that you didn't really buy his transition. I mean, I don't really think that I ever had any reservations about it, but I guess as somebody who didn't know that this was coming, I guess that I could see where you're coming from, so that's fair.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like once he is evil, I like the way in which he's evil, and I like that it connects to his reasoning with Flash. For like not doing enough because you don't have tragedy in your life. I thought that was an interesting point, which kind of gets contradicted when we get Barry Allen and like his whole thing is that he's got the tragic backstory now.
Yep. Yep.
But I just don't know, like it seems like that's really been eating at him, and yet it's only like one conversation that does it, you know? Like Grodd paralyzes him, and what is it, 2 or 3 issues later, he's Zoom. You know?
Yeah.
And, like, that's the part where I'm like,
He gets paralyzed at the end of 193, and then the Rogue profile on him is 197. So it is 4 issues later that we get that Rogue profile. Because I was going to talk about how much I love this, and I still love this, but I think my biggest problem with Zoom as a whole is that we don't get enough Hunter Zolomon before he becomes Zoom, which is, I think, where you're finding the problem.
See, I don't even know if that, because, like, I like the friendship that he has with Wally. I just don't think that he has enough motivation for the evil side. Like, I feel like he needed to be asking Wally to do things that Wally kept saying, no, that's just too far, throughout the entire book, and I just don't feel like that was happening. I feel like the tragic destruction of the friendship thing was built up well. It's just I don't feel the motivation for him to be Reverse Flash or Zoom. I'm gonna keep calling him Reverse Flash. Sorry. I don't feel that build up is there enough.
See, I really feel like the buildup is there because Hunter is still a good person. He just thinks that he has a flawed perception of what a hero should be. He keeps talking about how heroes should do all that is necessary, to borrow a line from Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins, and that's his difference with Wally, and that's it. So I don't think that Johns needed to draw out him wanting to get stuff from Wally and Wally saying no, because Johns did an interview either during or after his run where he said that he was sitting down talking to an editor and saying, oh, I really wish I could use Reverse Flash. I just wish he wasn't dead. And then the editor said, we'll make a new one. And so that's how Hunter Zolomon was born. And Johns made a point to make him Wally's friend so they could have this build-up and have that conflict. Not just that moral debate, but also that conflict of them being friends, because the one thing that Zoom brings to the table with his relationship to Wally that Thawne doesn't with his relationship with Barry is intimacy. And that intimacy isn't necessarily that moral discussion, but it's that they were friends, they have history, and even after Hunter is paralyzed, when Wally needs help at the top, the first person he goes to isn't Shire, it isn't Mario, it isn't Linda, it's Hunter, because Hunter is the brains of the operation.
Yeah, and I really like that. I like I like the friendship. It's just that turn on the dime. I just don't feel like Hunter is that person that thinks a hero needs to do anything no matter the cost, Well, I just don't buy that enough from what we've seen of him doing in this,
Well, and that's kind of why I wish we had gotten a little bit more of him, because by issue 197, which is the Rogue profile on him, we've had 20 issues of him, and in his introductory issue, I talked about how he has kind of a flawed perception of that, but maybe if Johns had taken maybe another 5 issues to get us inside his head a little bit more, then maybe his transition wouldn't be so, I guess, jarring would be a good word.
And maybe because I didn't know what was coming for him, I wasn't looking for that as much in the second volume,
Yeah.
So maybe there is stuff like that as he's introduced that fits that attitude of he's got a little bit too much. He's too intense on the costs, the ends justify the means kind of thing.
Well, because I think that's there, but to be fair, I've read this stuff a couple times, so maybe this maybe that's just for that's coming from. But so Zoom's Rogue profile, to kind of jump around a bit, is the third one we're getting, and we get one with Pied Piper in the beginning here. How did you feel about the Rogue profile as a structure to tell these stories from Johns now that we've gotten 3?
I really like that. It's really cool to just get really, really inside their head kind of thing. I really do enjoy that, and that is the thing where I can believe that this guy is obsessed with that one moment in his past, and he sees he totally sees this is where everything has gone wrong for me, and if I could just go back to this one instant, I can change my whole life. And I don't know, I kind of relate to that. I've had difficulties in my life and kind of traced it back to I wish I could just go back and shake myself and say don't do this thing. Don't take that bitch's number. Stuff like that. But, so I relate to that idea, and I like to see that kind of twisted on its head, and that's what's making him a villain. I really, really like just how damn powerful he is, and you don't see Johns usually has cool ideas for stories or fun ideas for how to plot things out. You rarely see him, at least himself, doing a lot with structure, and I have to assume that he is giving some kind of notes for the fight with Zoom, where
he has
it's
to.
just where it's just okay. Now they're in the North Pole. Now they're in the desert, and that kind of just drastic. You skip one panel and it feels like you've skipped a whole page of action. Really is great form and gives you a sense of speed for a thing that is static. your comic book is static, but
Right.
doing something where you're going to crazy exotic locations in between two panels is pretty brilliant in my book.
Well, that's because Zoom is just that fast. And as far as the collaboration goes, from what I understand, when Scott Collins came on the book, he and Geoff Johns spent like a weekend mapping out Keystone and Central City. So it wouldn't surprise me if they sat down and planned out this fight together, because Scott Collins continues to be at the top of his game here, and really showing how much faster Zoom is than Wally. We get the continuation of those yellow borders in between the panels here, and between them, and Zoom has red ones. So like when Zoom knocks the shit out of Jay a couple times, we don't even see him like run up to Jay and then punch him. It's just one solid red line in between the panels, indicating that he is so fast that it's happening in the blink of a moment, and not even the Flash can perceive it.
Yeah, I really like that. That is a really, really cool way to just visualize things. And it's, you mentioned that last time that Wally has yellow borders whenever he's doing super speed. And I remember you saying that, but it's just, I get so engrossed in what's going on that it becomes a visual cue that I'm not even picking up on, because it's just it's so subtly and perfectly integrated. It's that thing you don't see that makes it a little bit better when it's pointed out to you,
Oh, exactly. And like on that page where Zoom comes in with Linda in front of all the cops, and then you have that one panel of him holding Linda again in the same position that Barry killed Dawn in, and then all the cops pull up their guns. And that panel is overlaying the panel where he either knocks all of them out or kills them by snapping their necks. And in between the overlay is just that one solid red line. So we have multiple, instances here of Scott Collins doing these little subtle, neat things that accentuate how fast Zoom is, because Jay gives us that explanation. I think it's in the second to last issue here, that Zoom doesn't tap into the Speed Force, that he's derailed from time. So he's able to... the way it's kind of explained is that time moves at like a natural speed, and Zoom is derailed from that, so he can choose which speed he moves at relative to the natural flow of time, which is why they have a hard time understanding him. Like Shire says, it sounds like a broken record player when he's
talking. Yeah, I like the way they visualize when he's talking, like as he's threatening people. Like Impulse, fastest boy alive, Zoom, fastest man alive. Like it's just all ran together, and it's a really simple trick. But there's a lot of that throughout here. To break from the Zoom thing real quick and go back to the top issue. Like when the top is talking, all his word balloons are slightly tilted.
Yeah.
One direction or another. They're not quite, stacked like parallel, horizontal lines. They're just slightly angled. There's a lot of like neat little cues done for that.
Yeah.
It just gives it a little bit more immersion.
And in that rogue profile we get of Zoom, all of his flashbacks have the color scheme of the Reverse Flash costume, which is the first time we get the red borders around the panels, because all the panels are in shades of yellow, and then the borders are red, which is another neat hint when we get the reveal at the end of the issue of him in the costume, which is actually the first time that a Reverse Flash costume has reversed the symbol of the Flash.
Oh, is it going the opposite direction?
Yeah, because when Thawne was the Reverse Flash, his costume was literally a recoloring of Barry's, so his symbol was red and black, but it was still in the same direction. This is the first time that we get the symbol reversed. So when we see, the Reverse Flash in the Flash TV show, they pull a lot from the aesthetic of Zoom here, with the vibrating, with the reverse symbol, with all the red lightning and stuff. And actually, the red lightning is another cool thing, because Zoom doesn't tap into the Speed Force. It would be like, okay, we're doing this speedster. Speedsters have lightning. How do we give him this this visual familiarity with the lightning? Well, it's that him being outside of time stretches time, and so we get these windows in time, and those are what the red lightning bolts are, which is really cool. And it's go ahead.
Just really, really well visualized. Like I didn't realize that's what it was, but it just felt so natural as you started to see those pop up, especially because they're kind of set up a little bit in the Grodd stuff as you get the idea that you can just see visions every so often and stuff like that. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, I mean, those are more so what Grodd is putting in Wally's head, but the tears in time that we get in Blitz, the Zoom story, are actually pretty important, because one of the first ones we see where we actually see in time is when Zoom has Bart, and he's probably about to kill him, but then a window in time opens up, and we see Bart in a Kid Flash costume. And so Zoom, chucks him away and decides not to inflict this tragedy on Bart, telling us that, one, Bart is going to be Kid Flash at some point, and two, that Zoom isn't completely crazy, and that he is still in control, and that he is deciding who he inflicts this tragedy upon.
Man, it's really well done.
I know. It's
like,
amazing.
It felt so natural to just see that stuff as I was reading it, and I wasn't even thinking about it because I was just, engrossed in the story, engrossed in the moments. But, like, I'm looking at that sequence of Zoom holding Bart in a chokehold, looking at him, you get a close-up on that, and then the next thing is you see Bart in the tear. And, like, I didn't even register that we're seeing that tear a panel earlier. It just felt natural that it appeared there. Like, my eye didn't get confused as to why that was appearing the way it was. That's really cool, especially because that's used to defeat Zoom in the very end in, like, the most, classically supervillain tragic way. God, what's it remind me of? There's like one of those superhero movies where is it the first Fantastic Four movie where he gets like frozen solid like Victor Von Doom?
Probably.
Or something like that. It's kind of like a trope thing that we do with villains where they're like permanently stuck in just this awful situation that like you actually end up feeling sorry for them. And the way that we get that with Zoom here at the end, that he's stuck in the moment where his father-in-law died and his wife left him, just forever seeing that is just awful.
And that's a really good point. I don't necessarily want to jump to how we defeat Zoom, because there's so much to unpack here, and just in the 4 issues of Zoom. But probably my favorite moment about his defeat of Zoom is that the last window in time that appears is Wally and Linda saying they're going to be parents, and then Wally runs over to it, and then he's stuck in the same, kneeling position that Hunter is, saying he's won nothing.
Yeah, and I like it because it's a perfect mirror, right?
Yeah, because these guys really are the reverse of each other, and that's great.
Yeah, it's really, really cool to see that done and how that all works together.
So you brought up Hunter's father-in-law. I want to break that down just for a minute and kind of tie it back into some of the other Rogue Profile issues, because John's his signature on the Flash, other than Zoom, is the Rogue Profile issues, and I think they work so well because he takes like such a small motif and then builds an entire fucking character out of it, and it's amazing. So in Captain Cold's Rogue Profile in Book 2, we get the explanation that Cold is important to Captain Cold because that was the only place that was safe for him, and that was the only place where he could show his emotions. So it's not only a safe place, but it's an inversion of our expectations of Cold being a lack of emotions, where that's actually the only place he can really show his emotions. And Johns builds an entire character out of that motif. Then when we get the Pied Piper issue here, one of the first things Piper says, I think the first thing actually in his inner monologue, is, "No one ever listens to me." So that motif of listening is essential to Piper's character because he was deaf, but no one ever listened to him. And then when he did get those electronic things that let him hear, which I think were created by the guy who created the Metal Men, because he says his name was Magnus.
Yeah, Magnus.
He's able to listen better than anyone, and that listen is not just a literal thing, but a figurative thing where he can sort of get in tune with other people. And then with Zoom, we have silence. You know, he said Hunter Zolomon grew up in a silent home where no one ever talked to him or about him. And so when he met Ashley and her father, he loved it when her father talked his ear off about, you know, all the advancements he was making in the study of the psychology of metahuman criminals, because he hated silence. And then what's the first thing he observes about his powers when he realizes he has them is that everything is silent. And then he builds a character out of that, and that's amazing.
Yeah, and you know, Johns, I feel, gets maybe sometimes too much credit and other times not enough. Like, I feel like sometimes he does, you know, a lot of really, really subtle, really interesting work with that theme of silence, with the theme of cold, with the theme of listening. And yet, other times, like, I feel like people give him credit for the wrong things. And so this is just, like, a really good example of, I will defend Johns as a pretty good writer. It's just I feel like he overextends himself sometimes. And like this kind of stuff, you can tell that he really stewed on this for a while, and it's when he wasn't working on a billion things at one time.
I mean, I haven't read his Green Lantern, but I've read his New 52 stuff. I haven't read his JSA either, but I can say that this is definitely some of the most, like the best work that he does, and probably the most dense and the most thickly plotted, but not in a bad way, because all of those Rogue issues, take these little details and build these characters out of them, so everything feels natural and feels it doesn't feel artificial or contrived, because everything is coming from a character place.
Yeah, I agree. Not sure what. Can we talk about the way in which he's defeated again then? Because I thought that was just really, really an interesting way to defeat the villain, by like literally trapping him in his worst memory, just forced to see that forever.
And I'm glad that you found it so effective, because we're not even introduced to that until 2 issues or 3 issues prior. So that means it's doing what it should be doing and really getting you inside Hunter's head. And especially that scene where he's in Kansas City and he's seeing all those windows in time, kind of foreshadowing that the windows in time are not just a thing that he can use as a weapon to distract his enemies, but it's something that's distracting him as well. And the fact that he's
it's a side effect. It's not a weapon.
Yeah, well, like he can't control it. It's just random windows in time. So it's pretty ironic that he's having to see his greatest failure, and that he's stuck in suspended animation looking at that. And when Shire and Mario go in, Wolf has a bit of contempt and a bit of pity on his face for Hunter after going through all that Gorilla Grodd stuff with him. And then we get that like slow zoom in of his face, and then you see through the lenses of his mask, he's just stuck, and there's just like a tear rolling down his cheek. I love that.
Yeah, it is really good, and it's that thing where you almost feel sorry for him, but then you remember, oh yeah, he just killed, babies in womb.
Yeah.
That's really fucked. I really like a lot of things about just how evil it makes him really quickly, and how clearly delusional he is. Would you say that it would be fair to assume that the super speed is affecting his mind because he's going a little crazy?
No, because he has that line at the end of the Rogue Profile issue where he says, is it just, all these memories coming together, or is it a side effect of the speed? Obviously, he's not in his right mind because he's killing unborn twins to try to make the Flash a better hero, and that doesn't make any sense. But I don't think he's deranged or unhinged, because when in the beginning of this conflict, when we see him having Bart in the chokehold, he chooses not to hurt him. He chooses not to hurt Shire and Mario. He says he hopes that they're not part of the tragedy. This is a directed, particular attack, and so while he's not exactly in the right morally, he's not crazy. He's not a schizo. He's not Two-Face. Obviously, this stuff is putting pressure on him, but he's not, insane. And I think those little moments of him choosing not to hurt people are there so Johns can tell us, hey, this guy isn't crazy. He just has a moral disagreement with Wally, and that's why they're fighting.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. I don't know. There's, some stuff that he says. Doesn't he at one point say, "You'll thank me one day"?
Yeah, he does. Well, it's because he thinks he's right. It's not because he's crazy like the Joker.
Yeah, I'm not saying, he's completely batty or anything. I just think that it seems like there's some level of he's not in his right mind.
Well, keep in mind...
It's an obsession, maybe is the right word.
Well, keep in mind... He's known for having an ego, and those flashbacks of that we get of him in the FBI, he says, looking back on it, I totally had an ego and everything, and so when he becomes Zoom, I can only imagine that adding to it. Like when Wally finally gets up to speed with him, Zoom says, "You made it into my world. We're locked in between the ticks of a second in a place where we are immortal." And then Wally punches him and says, "No, we're human." And then Zoom's like, "I didn't push you hard enough. You're still pulling your punches." Zoom didn't push him hard enough after killing his unborn twins, and so now he's gonna put it on and kill Linda. That's a big moment that says something about Hunter, trying to put this pressure on Wally, and Wally still seeing him as a friend, as an equal, and seeing him as still redeemable, because he's just killed his unborn twins, and he's still pulling his punches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. So when we began this run, or when we began with John's first volume and the Grant Morrison stuff, you mentioned that Max Mercury, Jesse Quick, Jay Garrick, they were all around because DC was trying to embrace a legacy thing, right? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, they mentioned that Max Mercury has gone missing in Volume 2, but I don't think we ever get an explanation of where he went, other than something to the effect of the Rogues took him out, right?
Yeah, they said he was missing. I'm not totally 100% sure on what was going on with that, because Max Mercury was pretty much the full-time mentor of Bart Allen in his Impulse series, which I think was going on at the time of this. And then when it got canceled, I think it got canceled right before this, and then Johns kind of took Bart over to Teen Titans and, developed him a lot. But I don't think Max Mercury comes back until Flash Rebirth. So I don't think he pops up anywhere unless he's somewhere in the Bart Allen run on the Flash, which is before Flash Rebirth. I don't think he pops up anywhere.
No, that's fine. I thought that's interesting because you have Max Mercury has been taken out. Jay Garrick's he's still in this, but he seems to be less and less a part of it. He keeps disappearing off to Denver, which I think is the equivalent of a farm for JSA members. And then by the end of this, it looks like Jessie Quick has lost her connection to the Speed Force, and I don't know a lot about Flash continuity. But I do know general DC continuity fairly well. And from what I remember, I don't think I've ever read Jessie Quick pop up again.
She becomes the business manager of the JSA during John's run with that. And so I haven't read that, so I don't know how she gets her powers back per se, but she does have her powers in Flash Rebirth. So at some point during JSA, John's develops her, and really that's the beginning of John just doing multiple things at once, because at the end of this he's writing Teen Titans, and he's writing Bart there. He's writing Wally at the same time. He's writing Jay and Jesse during JSA. So, and then he takes care of Barry's reintroduction. So Johns has his hands in pretty much every major character in the Flash family. But it's just, it happens in different books.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting. It's weird because, like I said, we talked about the idea of legacy and stuff, and throughout this we've lost legacy characters. And by the end of this, we get the Barry Allen legacy brought back up, and then we get a retcon with Hal Jordan's Spectre.
Yeah.
You don't like that. I can already I can hear it.
Well, I think first we should address the Barry Allen thing, because that's something that's very important to Wally as a character. Wally is one of the most important characters in comic book history because he's the only teenage protege to take the mantle of his predecessor for more than like 2 or 3 years. Because Wally was the Flash,
for
the only
years.
For like 20 years, and then Bart Allen was the Flash for a year, and then Wally came back for another 5 or 6 years before Barry came back. And so people always talk about how the return of Barry Allen is like the greatest Flash story ever told because Wally gets over, his concerns about not living up to Barry's expectations by defeating Eobard Thawne. And I know you probably haven't read that story, but the Flashes dealing with the Flash who came before them is inherent to their characters. Barry had to deal with it because he came after Jay. Wally has to deal with it because he came after Barry. And Bart had to deal with it because he came after Wally. And all of them have this internal conflict going on with them. And so I feel that it's been appropriate for Johns to give us little subtle hints about this internal conflict up until this point, because in the first issue that Johns writes on the Flash, we get those 3 pages detailing the legacy of each Flash of Jay, Barry, and Wally, and what the lightning meant to them. In book 2, we get that little moment where Wally says that he's scared of Grodd, and Grodd is the only villain who's given him nightmares because it's the first time he's seen somebody killed, and the way Grodd killed someone is by snapping somebody's neck, which is the way that Barry killed Thawne. And then in here, we keep building to, should Wally kill or not? And that's really hammered home in the Run Riot story with Grodd, and that's great. And then in Blitz, Hunter's literally telling him to snap his neck and kill him the way Barry killed Thawne, and Wally chooses not to do so. And then at the end, Barry finally makes an appearance after 40 issues of Johns writing Flash, this big monolithic character who's known for killing. And then what do we get? What does he say? He says that heroes are heroes not because we want recognition. We have to do the right thing regardless of basically the consequences. And so that internal conflict has been bubbling up this whole time, and we finally get some sort of resolution here. But simultaneously, we get some foreshadowing for the future because Barry says, I travel back because this is the first of 3 hardest days of your life. So this is number 1. So we have 2 more to go. So look forward to seeing the other 2 of those.
Oh, man. That is really cool. I really like that moment. And again, it's just interesting to talk about the legacy aspect of it because seeing this happen, it acknowledges how important the legacy is, but admittedly, the fact that there have been 4 Flashes and they've all had different eras is just, it's alienating to new readers. Would you agree with that? The fact that you can't really hand someone, even though we've only been reviewing Wally West Flash, I kind of want to give a friend of mine who I know likes The Flash but doesn't read comics, I kind of want to give him my copy of Grant Morrison's Flash, but I feel like if you don't really understand the idea of the mantle and taking that up, then a lot of the stuff with Barry and with Jay is going to make some of those emotional beats not work as well. And so the idea of Wally being the second Flash is important to his character, but having it be so damn connected to him taking up that mantle is a little bit alienating to new readers. So I feel it's interesting that we've acknowledged the legacy of what it means to be the Flash, the Flash family, that whole thing, for so far into this run. And now at the end of this, and I don't know what happens in Volume 4 of this, but at the end of this, we're going, okay, now it's time to change things up and move forward without as much of that legacy connection, because that's what I feel is going on with that, without as much of that legacy connection, so that other people can get into this character.
Well, as far as the alienation goes, I think that's fair, but as somebody who's, as you said, clearly obsessed, who's read a lot of Flash, Johns handles this, the legacy of the character, the best out of any writer I've ever read. Better than Mark Waid, better than Francis Manapul and Brian Buccellato, better than Joshua Williamson. He handles that the best here because it's important to the characters, but you don't have to know every detail. Like we keep talking about Barry throughout the run, and we know he's known for killing Thawne in the Trial of the Flash. But we don't really get a good...
Yeah, I actually didn't know he was known for that, but you're right. It was so well just introduced and recovered for my benefit, which is really useful.
Yeah, I mean, but in the story itself, people don't really talk about Barry outside of the Trial of the Flash. So it's really interesting that this great guy who's supposed to stand for all these values is known for killing someone. And I think that that's a really interesting, ironic choice on Johns' part. But as far as the Spectre ending goes, with him restoring the secret identity, I fucking hate that, because some of the best stuff that Johns does with the legacy is when Wally's identity is public. You know, in books 1 and 2, and in this book, we get people reacting to Wally being the second Flash. And the greatest consequence of that is Zoom. You would not have had Zoom if Wally's identity was a secret to the public. And so we get so much character development and world building of Keystone and of the Rogues and what they think of the Flash because Wally's identity is public. And now we get rid of that. It's just like Johns, in that interview I referenced earlier, talked about how he wanted to, you know, shake things up for the 200th issue, which is the last issue in this book. And I feel like that was the wrong way to do it, because like Wally can reach a place of acceptance with him, you know, never quote unquote being Barry. But and after the speech from Barry too, realizing that he'll never be Barry and that, you know, Barry isn't forgotten. He lives on in memories. You know, Jay and Joan and Iris all have lines about how Barry isn't gone, about how he lives on in our memories and in Wally's memory too. I feel like retroactively changing the status quo after bringing Wally to this place where he should be accepting of the fact that he is not Barry and that he will never be Barry and that he unmasked himself for the wrong reasons is a great place to be, but then you don't need to change the status quo. You know, and I mean, moving forward, Johns does sort of reintroduce some elements. The title of the first arc in book 4 is called Ignition, and I love that title for a Flash story. But I really feel like the quality of writing kind of dips after this, and maybe it's because he's writing too many things, but maybe it's also because he changed the status quo of the book so drastically that he's not able to develop the characters as much as he was able to before.
And that could definitely be it. And again, that's one of the things that I feel Johns maybe has a bit of a problem with, is I feel he maybe obsesses too much about, or not obsesses. I feel like he doesn't focus enough on just telling the story naturally. I feel like he gets his head too wrapped up in what will sell, what will be a big talking point kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, that's totally fair.
But, you know, it is still really, really cool to read. I really like seeing this, and it's just enjoyable as hell. So we've talked mostly about Hunter Zolomon and his impact on this. I feel like it's wrong not to talk about the other stuff because I really liked a lot of the other stuff. So let's, I guess, in the spirit of Zoom, work backwards. And let's talk about the other big arc, which led into the Zoom arc, which is the Grodd arc, because man, he makes like all right. So when Arrow was in its second season and they announced that they're going to do a Flash show spun out of Arrow, I was like, wait, what? Are you serious? Because like Arrow in its initial seasons was doing like the whole kind of grounded superhero Nolan-esque kind of thing, just every so often throwing in a little bit of fantastic elements. But I'm like, Flash, really? The guy who's like biggest well-known villain is a talking telepathic gorilla? You're gonna spin him off out of a Nolan-esque show? And so I never understood how they're going to do that, and ultimately it didn't work very well. But to be fair, Grodd in the comics, since I'd never really read much of him, this is goddamn scary. He's like, he's like fucking like Hannibal Lecter if he could lift you over his head and slam you to the ground.
Geoff Johns does the best Grodd, and Scott Collins draws him the best too. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. It's really, really good, and I just. God, you get some really epic ass shots.
Yeah,
like every issue with Grodd has like a big 2-page splash that just looks epic as shit. And I'm thinking about the thumbnail for this video and really debating on whether or not I want to do one with Zoom or one with Grodd. And I think I'm going to go with Zoom just because that'll get more clicks because they'll see Reverse Flash. But still, man, these are really, really cool.
They are. Scott Collins is just such a good artist, and he's so versatile because he can do all this stuff. The way I think of Grodd is that he's got like the intellect of Lex Luthor, but an equal amount of savagery because he is this beast. All the stuff that happens here with Grodd is great. Like the end of the first issue is amazing because Flash comes down to the pipeline, and he's like, the one problem is that Grodd's cage is at the end of the hallway, which is amazing. So he's got to fight through all these people. Tar Pit sticks him up, and then Blacksmith comes in, and she's like, oh, you made a mistake coming here. I'm going to be their leader. And she's like, you'll never stop us. And then what does Grodd do? He's like, us, grabs her by the fucking head and throws her to the next wall and says, there is no us. And then he says there is only Grodd. And then the beginning of the next issue, he says you'll never run again. And says he's going to chew through his Achilles tendon, suck out all the bone marrow. And the Rogues are just like, all right, I'm out. Let's fucking dip.
Yeah, I love how like completely freaked out all the Rogues get. I will say the one decision I don't like is resurrecting Girder for this.
Oh, you don't like that?
No, because it was so epic when he got ripped in half. Like, that's a good way to kill him. And then just, like, if it'd be one thing if he actually had another story, but he's so not important in this book, so it just feels weird to resurrect him now.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think my favorite moment of Grodd releasing the Rogues, other than Cicada saying "Flash be with you" before he dips, is he releases Abracadabra, and he's like, oh, what are we gonna do with the Flash now? Saw him in half, and he's like, leave. This is my territory, my prey. And then Abracadabra tries to argue with him, and all he does is roar in his face, and he's like, disappear, Abracadabra, and he is out of there because Grodd does not fuck around. The only one to really stand up to him is Fallout, which is another cool through line for book 2.
Well, I like that because, it shows that all right, so I would have a hard time believing anybody in Arkham would choose to help Batman when he's on his last limbs, not counting I Am Bane, because the context for that is very different.
True.
But like if Batman were in Arkham getting the shit kicked out of him, I have a harder time believing any of his villains would stand up for him. Maybe the Joker would kill the person that's kicking the shit out of Batman because Batman is my lover, but just the idea that someone who was a villain would stand up for the hero that put him in jail because the hero has had such a profound effect on them is really, really interesting, and I like how that is shown through Fallout, again, carried over from book 2.
I love that
That's-
too. And again, we're still sort of getting like a variation of villains here, because just within that Grodd story, we have Grodd, who's the savage beast. We have the rogues who dip. Same thing with Abracadabra. We get Fallout, who helps him, who's on the other end of the spectrum. And this is the first appearance of Dr. Alchemy, and he's just there in the middle. And he's just sitting there reading his books while the Flash gets the shit kicked out of him. And then at the end of the story, when the Flash is going in for help, he's just like, I finished all my books. Time to find some new ones. And just leaves.
Yep. And you're missing one thing, which is like, okay, so we have the rogue that helps. We have the rogues that leave. We have someone else who is kind of in that middle ground too, is the rogue who wants to help. And I like the way that Wolf's character is progressing here.
Oh,
because
I know.
when he's introduced in that Iron Heights special at the end of book 1 of John's Flash, he's like really, clearly overboard. He's using his powers for evil, that whole thing. And it's an understandable evil, but it is still evil. And in this, throughout this book, through Hunter Zolomon, you see that, okay, Wolf is not a good guy, but he's not that kind of crazy. He's not that kind of bad guy, right?
Yeah.
He's like almost like a necessary evil kind of thing.
Yeah, he's kind of redeemed, but not real. Like when he apologizes to the Flash at the end, he's not bullshitting, but he's at the same time not trying to be redeemed. I think he's just one of those rare characters who's justified in good things and equally justified in horrible things, or at least as close to that as you can get.
Yeah, like I like that he's gone way overboard, but at the same time he's dealing with supervillains who are notorious for getting out and causing more trouble. So you kind of need someone to be going overboard, because
right.
let's face it, they're like what you really need is someone to cure supervillains. But as long as idiots like us keep buying comics, that's never going to happen. So the only other thing is you need someone who's going to actually keep them locked up, kind of thing. So I find that really, really interesting and a cool direction to go with the characters. So he's had a wake-up call and realized that he was being cruel, not doing what was necessary. And so I feel, at least for the sake of this book, Wolf has kind of found, that thing of seeing what he could become if he kept going too far in Hunter Zolomon.
Right.
And I really like that.
How did you feel about the follow-up issue to the Grodd thing, Dead or Alive, where he goes to Gorilla City?
I like that. I like all the stuff about the Gorilla City, particularly that the color red is banned there.
Oh, I know.
Because it is the color of blood. And I love the conversation that Flash has the second he gets to Gorilla City. He's like, why do you wear that color? What? Blood. You wear the color of blood. It is forbidden in Gorilla City. Is this to remind you of what you're fighting for? To avenge the blood that has been spilled? No. To frighten your enemy, then? I don't wear this uniform to frighten anyone, and I don't fight for vengeance. Yet in your voice and mind and heart, you have come to Gorilla City seeking blood, as all humans do. And I like that Flash has got this righteous indignation, and yeah, he has a right to be pissed off at Grodd. Grodd has done something horrible to his friend, but at the same time, he isn't. In his mind, he's like this white knight crusading, but from the perspective of Gorilla City, he's vengeful, and they hate that aspect of people.
Yeah, I mean, I think both perspectives are a little bit right, because Namandi, the leader of Gorilla City, who's the son of Solovar, basically tells us that he isn't a telepath, but that they can connect emotionally. And so
that's what it's called.
And so what he's getting from Wally is that he does have this bloodlust. He's filled with vengeance, but he's trying to tell himself he's not. And I feel like this is a really appropriate story to have just in the structure of the whole run. Right before we deal with Wally facing Zoom and facing his reverse and facing the question of should he kill a reverse Flash if he's put in the same situation as Barry. Because Wally hasn't necessarily dealt with killing someone before. I mean, he's talked about it with Grodd before, but I feel like this is a really appropriate story to have right before that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just looking through some of the art as I'm flipping through this while we're talking, and on that page where we get the panel of the like wall cave kind of drawing of Flash that's colored with red.
I love that.
Yeah, I'm looking over Scott Cullen's art, and I finally pegged who he reminds me of. Frank Quietly.
You think?
Yeah, like if you go grab your copy of All-Star Superman and like just some of these pages, like yeah, that's exactly how Frank Quietly draws faces.
I'll have to look at that because I've never really gotten that vibe.
It didn't occur to me. I was just looking at some of these close-ups that we get in these panels. I'm like, that I've seen Frank Quietly do that before. So it's just a random little thing that reminded me of. Also, I like the look of Gorilla City. It's like it looks still super technological, but it's got that like tree species kind of feel to it. I think it's really cool.
It's perfect. Again, this is another thing that Johns and Collins really do a definitive take on, and no one else has really struck gold with. So there's just a lot of like gems in this book, and like the issue that comes before the Gorilla Grodd stuff, the Hawkman one with Brother Grimm coming back. That one's a really cool issue too, even though its effect isn't necessarily as large as the Gorilla Grodd story. But my favorite moment from that issue is where Hawkman has to like take him up and he's like, there's trepidation in your voice, and Wally says, I've worked with a lot of heroes from the Atom to Zatanna. Every time someone has a quote-unquote team-up, rumors hit the spandex grapevine, we all talk. The Ray's a mooch, Halo will talk your ear off, and Animal Man and his family actually sent fruit baskets. Some say you're moody, growling like a savage one minute, and then talking about Shakespeare and opera seria the next. Others say you're as professional as they come, treating them with nothing as they respect. And then a Hawkman just says, I think you can come to your own conclusion. And then we have that one panel of Wally silent, just looking up at him. And Hawkman asks him this, and I love this. And he says, you know what they say about you? And Wally says, what do they say? And Hawkman says, they say you make your uncle very proud. Mm-hmm. I fucking love that. It's so good. That's like another subtle thing about the legacy that we're bringing in. I love the little moments like that we get in this run. That one in particular is very endearing.
Yeah, I agree. I really, really like that. I think it is. Yeah, that was the best moment of the issue. Like that we're actually kind of giving Linda more to do in this book, and you really need to for that moment at the end where their future children are killed by Zoom. You really need her to have just more to do, because otherwise that would feel really cheap. But she just feels like more of a character in this book, with the whole she's loyal to her husband thing, because she's got the friend who's like, yeah, I feel like you're looking for more than like a study buddy. He's like, actually I am, and then it turns out he's the bad guy.
Yeah.
and she just gets more development here. Like, I liked the sense that she's got that sense that something's wrong with the pregnancy, stuff like that.
Well,
and that ends up paying off really well.
I don't care for Linda in this book.
Okay.
Because you're right that there's more time spent with her, but I don't really think it's like more development, because that whole thing of her saying it doesn't feel right, I feel like comes out of nowhere, because nowhere has she said before that she's not feeling it, that something doesn't feel right. And that isn't inherently a bad thing, but then she begs Dr. Tina McGee to do these tests, and they find out they're having twins. And then all of a sudden she's like, oh my gosh, everything is right. This is what we were missing. Everything feels perfect. And that seems like an immediate, like, contrived artificial flip of a dime sort of character switch that I just feel like is completely, like, she literally says it all feels perfect. Like, that's just... But on the next page we get Hunter's Almond where everything isn't perfect with him. So we're foreshadowing, something happening.
Yeah, that's what I feel like it is. It's foreshadowing. It's letting you know that not everything is perfect. I feel like that's added into the sense that stuff is going wrong and that like she's just very hopeful. I don't know. Like I feel like she's just given more character progression in this, even if it is subtle and in the background.
I mean,
like particularly with the moment with the guy in the first arc, whatever his name is, the magic-looking dude.
Grimm.
Grimm.
That's Brother Grimm from the Wonderland arc. Scott Collins redesigned him a little bit so he looks more like a fairy tale. But
yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, Brother Grimm. Like the moment where she like mentions, "Hey, yeah, I'm getting some vibes from you, and I'm just not feeling it, bro." Like that kind of worked for me. And then she has a conversation with Iris about feeling the pressure of celebrity as a reporter kind of thing, because you and I talked about that in the last volume where we didn't really love the idea of taking her from a reporter to putting her in med school because it just felt so arbitrary. That conversation made it feel less arbitrary.
Yeah,
that
I
conversation
agree.
made it feel like more development had happened. Like when she wasn't like in the media spotlight, it was easy for her to feel like it was okay to constantly be asking people questions and to a degree pestering them, which is what you're supposed to do when you're a good reporter, by the way.
Yeah.
But then being under that spotlight is like, yeah, actually, this is awful.
I would still say one of the major flaws, just the only other flaw that I have with Blitz is that it's convenient that the only time we've seen Wally and Linda either be hounded by the paparazzi or dealing with the paparazzi is in the story that Wally decides to restore his secret identity. That's convenient, and we should have seen that before, but whatever. But the other thing that I don't like that Linda does is when Wally goes to Linda after he's defeated Zoom, and she asks if he stopped him, and he says yes. And then she starts to ask if he's dead, and Wally interrupts her, and he says no. And she says, "But our babies," implying that she wanted him to kill him, and I don't like that.
See, I think that is very human, very real.
It's tough. We haven't really talked about whether or not Wally should have killed Zoom yet. I feel like that makes sense for her to have that reaction, but Wally just says I'm sorry and doesn't try to get her to the mindset that he's at. Because even from the beginning, like I pointed out that moment where he punches Zoom once he gets up to speed and he's still pulling his punches, Wally never seemed that broken up about it from the beginning. So I guess it just seemed kind of weird that Linda was, even though it makes sense. I don't know.
I don't know, like, when we get that reveal that Zoom has gone and he confirms, I love where he's holding Wally's head, and he whispers it to him. He's like,
yeah.
Your wife just found out that your children are dead. I killed them with a snap of my fingers. That's when Wally tries his hardest. Like, he's got, that's an interesting thing. If you look at the panel, it's like, you were going to have a baby girl and a baby boy. And if you look at Wally's face in that, he's got a single tear dropping from his eye. And then we look at the last time we get a look at Zoom, and he's got a single tear dropping from the same eye.
Yep.
So, I don't know, that feels like really, really connected to me, and I feel that really works. Especially because we don't get Wally's immediate reaction. On the page turn, we get what I think is a variant cover. Or maybe it's a wraparound cover?
Yeah, Scott Collins did all the covers for issues 197 to 200, and so the back of issue 199 has that image on the left, and so he's posted it on social media. Basically, it's like a giant 4 to 5 page spread of the covers of 197, 198, 99, and 200, and they all link together. And so that's why we had that blank page with the flash symbol on it as he snapped his fingers before Linda, so we could keep that same page turn.
Okay. Well, what I like about that is the page turn you get is Wally and Linda, together
Yeah.
weeping. So I don't know, maybe we don't get a ton, but like I feel like we get a lot because that is the point at which Wally is so helpless. Like just everything you look at, he's just completely being destroyed through the next issue. He never gets a moment where he's got any kind of triumph, and he is just so sad. You can just tell he's been so completely broken by this. I think it really, really works.
That's fair. I really like the first 2 pages of issue 200 where we get both of their faces together, and I love Zoom's dialogue here. And then the next page, we get Zoom again in the position to kill Wally in the same position that Barry killed Thawne, and he says that he's gonna cripple him, and you can kind of see that his hand is vibrating a little bit more than his body. And I love how we're doing the like intro bit of Wally West was struck by a bolt of lightning as the symbol, and then we get a reverse of that for Zoom. Mm-hmm. I love those little bits of dialogue. Those 2 pages are just fantastic. I kind of want posters of both of them.
Yeah. But anyway, so I do feel like Linda's characterized a lot better here. I feel like she is an actual character here and less of a plot device.
Okay, that's fair. Maybe I'm just not reading it enough. I mean, she definitely gets more to do here, and that would contribute to it. Maybe I just need to read it without having that bias from the last couple things. Yeah,
that's fair. All right, I want to keep going back, though, and talk more about the Piper issue, because I think that, or the 2 issues that involve Piper really heavily, because I think those are a really interesting place to open, since we dealt with, Wally losing all of his allies throughout the entirety of Book 2, and that was really interesting, because it really was down to him to save the day, and how he did it was by convincing other people to help him, like his ability to make allies. And so I think it's interesting here to go back to Piper, who was the one he couldn't save last time, and how while he's trying to save Piper, we get all these connections to all these other people, again, that he is making his allies, making his friends along the way, and I think that's really effective.
I think so too. I mean, the first issue of this book is called Messengers, and it opens up with Wally going around the country trying to reconnect with everybody. And I think that's a fitting sort of epilogue for Crossfire after dealing with everything. And then you're right, at the end of the issue, we get Piper, the one person he couldn't save, and then Piper going around trying to save himself. And he goes to James Jesse, the first trickster, who's a G-Man now. But we find out by the end of the issue, after he's talked with Heatwave, that they have something called a project going on, which will be interesting to see moving forward, because this is the first appearance of James Jesse and Heatwave, so we're getting more of the original Rogues. And I love Heatwave here because he's still a pyromaniac, but he's not hot-headed and stupid. And I love how when Piper tries to hide out with him, he says, "You can stay here if you want, but my advice is simple. Call the Flash. Wally West is a good man." That's great. Like, Mick Rory immediately seems like the most sensible out of all the Rogues, because he's immediately acknowledging that Wally West is a good man and that Piper should go to him for help.
Yeah, I really like that, and that was really interesting. Of course, if Piper just had chilled a little bit longer and not escaped Iron Heights, guess what? Wally would have gotten him out. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that doesn't come back by the end of this, so we're still waiting to see what happens with that. And I'm interested to read more of that, though.
Well,
wait, does that connect with the retcon or no?
I'm just trying to be careful here. It kind of does.
Well, I just want to know if we get a conclusion to the Pied Piper story arc, or if they just retcon. Okay.
Yes, because the retcon only deals with no one remembering Wally's identity, and so when we pick up in book 4 and then continuing on into book 5, Wally has to deal with that and the repercussions of that decision. But for the most part, everything is still continuing as is. It's just that people don't necessarily know that Wally is, the Flash. Because I talked about this last time a little bit, how the Rogues are the most important part of Johns' run, not because of the Rogue profiles, but because they're the main conflict. And so we have the classic rogues, the reformed rogues, and then the new rogues, and everything is sort of bubbling to conflict between them. And then Wally and his Reverse Flash are sort of caught in the middle of this war that's, bubbling.
Yeah, I agree. I really like the way that this is all coming together by the end, and I'm still curious about what it's going to be like removing the everyone knows the secret identity thing. I thought it was a little cheap. I like the points Hunter Zolomon was making. I thought it was a little cheap that we just suddenly showed cops think that Wally West is just a glory hound. I was like, no, that's forced. That's just forced.
Well,
There's been no indication of that before.
Well, right. Well, that's another thing. Like I said about the paparazzi, those two little moments just kind of feel out of place because we've never seen them pop up before. So maybe that's where part of your issue with Hunter's motivation is coming from, because we have those two or three little moments that are really important to get Wally to that place at the end of Blitz, and we get them during Blitz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Is there anything else you want to talk about with this one, or are you good? Because I feel like we've been through pretty much all of it, except to say I like the costume design for the top.
Oh, you do?
Cool. Yeah, it reminds me of Joker's outfit in the first episode of the Batman, where it's got the straitjacket.
Yeah, I love that costume.
Yeah, so it reminded me of that, but it actually fits for the top for some reason in a way it doesn't quite work long term with the Joker.
I like it too. There's one other thing that I want to talk about, but while we're on the topic of the top,
on the top, ick.
I realized that as I was saying it. The top is an important character moving forward, and so Johns actually does a lot of work to sort of retcon him into a usable character, because Wally talks about how he has some weird mind over matter power, because the top here can both physically spin very fast but also distort the perceptions of light in people's eyes. And so those are two separate powers that he's had in the past, and Johns just gives that brief explanation to synthesize the two of them, and I think that that's really cool. But the last thing I wanted to talk about is, I guess, Wally's dilemma with killing Zoom, because we kind of skated around that, and I guess Zoom's relationship to Ashley, because we can talk about that in the next couple books. But how did you feel Geoff Johns built up this tension of should Wally kill or should Wally not kill?
I like the tension, and I really like the decision. It's interesting because he does a similar thing but comes down on the opposite side with Green Lantern.
Really?
Yeah, because it's during the Sinestro Corps War in Green Lantern, where Sinestro's army is literally decimating the Green Lantern Corps because the Green Lanterns don't have the ability to use deadly force. And it'd come up that the Green Lanterns are too weak because they have to be taking care of everyone, and the more and more wars they were fighting, it's just getting too hard to do it, and they're losing too many people. So in the really, really big tension moment in the Sinestro Corps War, the call comes over the rings from the Guardians saying that they now have the ability to use deadly force, and it comes with consequences.
Oh, wow.
So, here, I like it's a really similar thing of, should I kill or should I not kill? And there are, Zolomon's pointing out that there are all these problems with killing. Or with not killing, with being too open about yourself, and now everyone knows who you are and knows who your loved ones are, and yet you're just running around and leaving them out in the open and all this stuff. Yet you're making these huge enemies, like me. Now let's see if you want to stick to these decisions when it starts to cost you something.
Right. And I think go ahead.
I really think the moral dilemma there that he sets up is really, really profound and interesting in a way that it's usually not for superheroes. We've done this so often with superheroes, the kill or not kill thing. And I like that. I like it when it feels like every hero actually has a different reason for it.
Yeah, me
as
too.
opposed to just the general, oh, well, then I'd be just like them. Because I feel like Batman was the first to say I'd be just like them, and we never really got an explanation that worked with that satisfied me until Under the Red Hood. And here, the idea that Wally doesn't want to kill because he sees hope in people, and that hope has been rewarded, as we've seen with characters throughout, like Radioactive Man or Fallout. Yeah, like with Fallout. Again, he has this ability to turn people to his side.
Yeah,
That other heroes don't. So I think that, like, the idea that he has hope for Hunter and that he's not letting Hunter's, brutality, Hunter's evilness affect that hope in others, including Hunter, I think is really profound and really works well for the character.
I completely agree. I think that Zoom is a really profound character because he forces Wally to have this conflict and forces him to face this tragedy. And I think that speaks to his ability to just be a really fucking good antagonist. Because it's not just about should I kill or should I not? It's should I help a friend? And should I have helped a friend before? And like you brought up the consequences. That's another reason why I feel like it's cheap to give Wally his secret identity back at the end of the story, because Wally is dealing with so many ideas and they're kind of swept under the rug when his secret identity is not public. Because if the moral of the story is you shouldn't travel through time, but that doesn't mean you can't help your friends, then the moral should be the lesson he should take away, Wally should be that I revealed my identity because I didn't want Barry to be forgotten. And by the way, that's a really great panel where Wally says that he doesn't want them to forget Barry. But I made this decision. I can't change it. And this decision has a lot of bad consequences, but I have to live with that. I feel like that would have been a much more satisfying ending than just giving him his identity back. And I feel like that's maybe because, like you said, Johns is writing for events, writing for sales, writing it because it's the 200th issue and he wants a new status quo moving forward. But I feel like if that ending was changed and just tweaked a little bit to where Wally maintained his identity being public and he had to face those consequences head on and live with them with Linda, that would have been a much more satisfying ending.
Yeah, I agree. I respect the decision, but I still don't think it fits from a story perspective, is what I'm coming down to.
Yeah.
Because again, it's alienating to talk continuity and long-term continuity with new readers. Like, I buy my books every Wednesday, and I usually try to read one while I'm at work because I get another break after lunch. And I'll read them in the break room. And people always ask, oh, what's that issue? What's this issue? So this week, I was reading Superman number 38, which was part of the whole Super Sons crossover. Mm-hmm. And someone asked me, so what's going on there? And I go, oh, well, a former Robin from an alternate timeline has become evil and has come into the main timeline in order to kill Superman's son.
Yeah.
And someone just looks at me and goes, that's the most comic book sentence I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And like, I've had similar conversations with people where I'm like, oh yeah, this book's about Damian Wayne. They go, who's that? Oh, he's the fifth Robin. Wait, there are 5 Robins? Yeah, this one's Batman's son. What? It's just like,
exactly.
I love Damian Wayne. Damian Wayne's one of my favorite characters, but it's a really complicated thing to try to explain to people. So on some level, yeah, you need that new reader introduction point. And I guess, to me, I respect at least that we were keeping Wally the Flash in doing this status quo change-up, because so often what we do when we do a reset to status quo is we go with the original character. Hence why, Xavier and Xavier and Magneto have been the leader and antagonist of the X-Men for God what knows how long past their relevance and all this other stuff. So yeah, just throwing that out there. I don't like it in the context of the story, but I do understand and respect the decision itself.
I mean, I feel like Geoff Johns does such a good job of not needlessly convoluting things until this ending here, where we have a character who's never appeared before, who's the Spectre but appearing in his Green Lantern costume, who's somehow has the power to rewrite memories of everyone on the planet and not on the planet. Like, that just seems like
that's connected to all the stuff that was going on with the Spectre being attached to Hal Jordan post Parallax. To be fair, it's interesting that we get a scene with Barry and Hal.
Yeah, I love that.
Because Barry died defeating Hal when he went crazy as Parallax. And that's really funny because we get another scene like that during Blackest Night where they're acting like it's the first time they've hung out, which would totally be forgivable if they weren't written by the same dude.
well, he says, "You're well on your way, Hal," and he's like, "Well on my way to what?" Teasing that Johns was already planning to do Green Lantern Rebirth 2 years before it ever came out, which is really cool. How do you feel about the last 2 pages of this book?
I am so fucking confused with those last... Does Wally West not know he's the Flash? That's weird. I don't understand.
Yes, I think I can tell you that much. So the Spectre's deal is that no one will remember, not even ... Wally and Linda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Another, I guess, important thing to close on is that we get the timestamp of 2 months later. So Geoff Johns' entire run on the Flash in the continuity of the story takes place in the span of about a year. So the first 3 books up until the last 2 pages of issue 200 take place in the span of about like 3 to 4 months ish, probably closer to 3 months, and then we get the 2 months jump, and then there will be another like 7 or 8 months in book 4 and 5 that take place.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, didn't book 4 just come out?
It did.
Okay, I'm gonna have to pick that up sometime soon, and we will return for book 4 of Geoff Johns' The Flash.
Awesome.
All right, let's go ahead and do a rating real quick, and then we'll close out. I think I'm gonna give this 3. No, I'm gonna go higher. I'm gonna give this 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5 top hats on the top of the top.
That's a triple entendre. I'm probably gonna do. Man, now I'm like trying to rack my brain about what I gave the other 2. I would probably give this a 5 out of 5, despite some minor problems. Reverse Flash symbol actually being reversed.
Alternate nouns could have been glasses of water that have not finished falling,
which was really cool.
Yeah, I love that reveal. That was really cool. Like, it's neat because you see it happening, and it's just like stuck there in panels, but they don't draw attention to it.
Yeah.
Alternately, you could go with exploding cosmic treadmills that give you superpowers.
What else could there be? Bowls of blood that you paint on walls with.
Yeah. Well, hold on. Let me ask you a question about that, because you actually understand arts and stuff, okay? Because I've seen this come up in a number of things. How effective would blood actually be as a medium of paint? Like, would it actually dry and properly stain something? Or would it just, like, kind of set in and then leave, like, a really, light stain long term?
That's a really good... I mean, I've never personally painted with blood, and I pride myself in that. Oh, well,
if you're going to be a prude about it, damn.
But, I mean, you would probably have to paint on, like, a flat surface so it wouldn't, like... run off all because it's so watery. Like I don't know. I don't. Maybe because they're an advanced society, they figured out how
Gorilla blood has different properties.
Yeah, and maybe they figured out how to put some like powder in it or something to make it more or less watery and more sticky. Or I don't fucking know. That would be the only answer.
Okay. Anyway, all right, everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I'm the Artist.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.